acre and a half, burning hot. Got it. We'll get them rolling.
Good request for 6 jumpers to the Lolo.
Jumpers will be Anderson, Staus, Pepione, Rayala, Kenny,
Hayes, Spotter Jackson will be going in Twin Otter Empire 19.
Dispatch, Empire 19. Empire 19, Lolo dispatch. Yeah, we're 5 miles out and have the smoke in sight. Streamers away. This will be live. Jumpers away. That looks real good. Let's go with the same approach.
Hundreds of Smokejumper missions are flown every year in the western United States and Alaska. These flights involve some risk because they're flown at low altitudes and low airspeeds in mountainous terrain.
Jumpers away.
As a Smokejumper pilot, you're responsible for all aspects of flight safety. Managing these risks is your responsibility. This program has been designed to show you ways to reduce the risks of Smokejumper flying. As pilot in command, you must take charge of flight safety. Everyone expects you to speak up about flight safety concerns right away, before moving on to the next stage of a Smokejumper flight. The flight safety records of Bureau of Land Management and Forest Service Smokejumper pilots over the years have been excellent, but some haven't always followed safety procedures. The results? Drop pattern stalls. Competent professional pilots should be able to avoid these problems, but they've happened. Drop pattern stalls have occurred when pilots banked too steeply or got too slow on final. Spins or spirals resulted from uncoordinated flight at low airspeeds. In 1986, a Smokejumper aircraft lost nearly 1,500 feet in a spiral before recovering. And at least twice in the past, pilots have seriously misread terrain on cargo drops. Fatal crashes resulted. Flying Smokejumper missions doesn't mean flying on the edge of catastrophe. The risks are known. Procedures have been developed to minimize them. But on occasion, these procedures don't make it out of the handbooks and into the cockpit. By themselves, safety procedures don't prevent stalls and crashes. Pilots do. It's your responsibility to learn these procedures and apply them to every mission you fly. Nothing the Forest Service or Bureau of Land Management does to fight fires warrants taking excessive risks. Granted, smokejumping is an aggressive business, and smokejumpers want to hit a fire fast and hard. But that doesn't justify compromising flight safety. Flying Smokejumper missions requires 4 things: pilot skill, knowledge, judgment, and a safety-conscious attitude. 2 of these elements, pilot skill and knowledge, were evaluated before you qualified as a Smokejumper pilot.
Through check rides in the Smokejumper pilot karting program, the Forest Service and BLM confirmed that you possess the basic skills and knowledge to fly Smokejumper missions. But some karted pilots have stalled or even crashed. Why? They had the skills. Perhaps they lack the judgment and safety-conscious attitude that make a good Smokejumper pilot. So where do pilots get into trouble? A standard Smokejumper drop pattern has a crosswind leg, a downwind, base, and final, similar to an airport traffic pattern. One trouble spot for stalls is on the turn to final. If you overshoot the turn, poor judgment might lead you to bank too steeply. That's when a stall can happen. An accelerated stall on the turn to final has happened more than once, but it shouldn't. If you follow prescribed airspeeds and bank angles, a stall should never happen in the drop pattern. Smokejumper drop airspeed is 1.3 V stall or 90 knots, whichever is greater. Drop airspeeds are calculated using flight manual figures for the wings level stall with idle power, selected drop flap setting, maximum gross weight, and full aft CG. Calibrated airspeed figures are used in calculating drop speed. The final 1.3 V stall airspeed is then converted to indicated airspeed for operational use. A specific flap setting may be prescribed for some aircraft if it will reduce stall airspeed without increasing drag too much. If a drop flap setting is prescribed for the aircraft you're flying, use it when you drop jumpers or cargo. The prescribed airspeed depends on that flap setting to provide adequate margin above stall. Prescribed drop airspeeds even allow for a bank of more than 50 degrees without stalling. Smokejumper drop pattern maneuvers can almost always be flown with no more than 30 degrees bank. 45 degrees should be an absolute maximum. But remember, in the real world on a turbulent day with your attention drawn outside the cockpit by fire activity, airspeed can vary above or below 1.3 V stall by as much as 5 knots. And if you make a 45-degree bank turn 5 knots below the prescribed airspeed, the aircraft will be very close to an accelerated stall configuration. The point should be clear. Don't fly drop patterns at airspeeds below those prescribed. Smokejumpers will tell you they like slow drop speeds because they get better exits or more accurate cargo drops. Don't be tempted to slow down a little to please the jumpers. Your job is to fly the pattern safely. Stick to the 1.3 V stall airspeed. Try to plan your drop patterns so they don't require banks of more than 30 degrees. You may wind up in situations where you need 35 or 40 degrees, and that's okay, but consider anything over 30 degrees a red flag, and never exceed 45 degrees. If you need to bank that steeply to get lined up, go around for another pass. It's hard to understand how stalls occur in aircraft equipped with stall warning systems. If a stall happens, either the pilot is disregarding the warning or has disengaged the device. In either case, it's dangerous and irresponsible. Stall warning systems are tested in all Smokejumper aircraft. At an airspeed 5 knots below 1.3 V stall, the aircraft can bank 35 degrees without encountering the stall warning. That's 5 knots slower than prescribed drop speed and in a bank 5 degrees more than normally required. So if you encounter stall warnings, you need to correct your flying technique. Let's review the important points. Know the prescribed minimum drop pattern, airspeeds, and flap settings for your aircraft and use them. Smokejumper patterns should be flown at no more than 30 degrees bank. Never exceed 45 degrees bank at drop airspeed. And pay attention to the stall warning system in your aircraft. If you're flying correctly, the stall warning won't come into play in routine drop pattern maneuvers. If it does go off, correct your flying by increasing your airspeed or reducing your bank, even if it means you have to go around and start over on the drop run.
Obviously, the problem isn't with the safety procedures. The problem is, occasionally, they don't make it out of the classroom and into the cockpit. Judgment and a safety-conscious attitude help bridge the gap between classroom and cockpit.
Speed 44 25 minutes out.
In the real world, over a hot-going fire, things can get pretty hectic. Everything's going on at once. The radio traffic can be unbelievable. Dispatch is calling someone, retardant aircraft are chattering, helicopters are calling in, fire personnel on nearby fires can be heard, and the spotter in the rear of the aircraft is talking to you on the intercom. It creates an atmosphere of urgency, confusion, rush, and excitement. You can sense the jumpers and the spotter are keyed up, anxious to hit the fire. With other aircraft inbound, you may feel pressure to fly at extra fast patterns to complete your drops before they arrive.
Ready for a jumper pass.
It's obvious the jumpers need to get on the ground in a hurry. Everything's going at once, and this can affect you and flight safety too.
It's natural to get wound up over the fire. In fact, it's pretty easy to stop thinking like a pilot and start acting like a firefighter. There's a real urgency to get on with an aggressive initial attack. That's a pretty good idea for a firefighter, but as a pilot, you're responsible for flight safety.
A pilot who gets caught up in the spirit of aggressive initial attack does foolish things, like trying to salvage drop patterns with aggressive 45-degree-plus bank turns rather than taking time to go around. That pilot becomes a liability. Sooner or later, hot dog pilots get themselves and their smoke jumpers into serious trouble with drop pattern stalls.
Good judgment and a safety-conscious attitude mean a commitment to fly your airplane safely. A professional pilot who flies smooth, safe patterns and goes around occasionally when necessary is an asset to the Smokejumper program.
Many pilots get into trouble through misplaced concern for the jumper's exits from the aircraft. Jumpers and pilots spend a lot of time together, talking, shooting the bull. It's natural to want to be well-liked, to be considered a good pilot. But smoke jumpers aren't pilots. They don't know all the elements that influence flight safety. Of course, smoke jumpers don't want the aircraft to stall, but as parachute jumpers and firefighters, they have two immediate concerns when it comes to your flying. Number one, they like slow drop speeds because they get better exits. And number two, they want cargo dropped with pinpoint accuracy so they don't have to pack it long distances or retrieve it from trees. If your aircraft happens to be a Twin Otter, pleasing jumpers with a slow drop speed is no problem. But if you're flying a high-performance aircraft like a Beech 99 or a Volpar, the prescribed 1.3 V-stall drop speed will be faster than jumpers like.
In the past, pilots of some high-performance aircraft developed the habit of slowing airspeed a few knots, and then maybe 5 knots or even more, trying to give jumpers smoother exits. They ignored flight safety and abandoned prescribed drop speeds to please the jumpers. Drop pattern stalls resulted. Besides the pressure put on you by jumpers, the urgency of activity over the fire can get you in trouble. It focuses your attention outside the cockpit, distracting you from flying.
If you get totally engrossed in any aspect of the fire for too long, you can easily get behind the airplane.
Streamers away. Straighten it out a little. I'm starting to lose the streamers. This will be live. Roger. Jumpers away. The last stick, we're ready for cargo.
Besides normal distractions, if a problem develops with some equipment, you can get totally distracted from flying the airplane. Over a fire, there are a lot of distractions. A safety-conscious pilot develops habits that keep an instrument scan going. Remember, you must be sensitive to the sounds and other cues of aircraft performance, regardless of the growing demands that draw your attention outside the cockpit.
We're ready and back, and this will be a fire pack on a 12-foot square.
Safe smoke jumper flying isn't the same for all pilots, especially during low-level cargo drops. Some pilots have the skill and experience to fly very difficult cargo runs easily and safely. For others, especially new pilots, the same run may exceed their capabilities. No matter what level of skill or experience you have, take pride in having the good judgment to fly within it. Pilots of average ability and minimum experience who fly within their limits are outstanding pilots. Those with above average abilities who routinely push to the edge of their limits are an accident waiting to happen.
Don't let flying become a competition. Old Joe may be known as the best pilot in the business, and you may feel like showing everybody that you can do anything he can do. But he didn't earn the respect he has by flying beyond his capabilities. Pilots who demonstrate good judgment and hold a little extra altitude on a tough cargo drop deserve a lot more respect than hotshots who get in over their heads.